So about 20 years ago, my mom and I decided to take a trip together to Scotland. We followed our guidebook's recommendations, and after a couple days in Edinburgh, we took a train north up to the Isle of Skye in the Northern Highlands. The scenery was spectacular. Craggy mountain peaks, sea cliffs shrouded in mists, dramatic coastline, and charming villages. When we got to Skye, my mom suggested that we go horseback riding. She has happy memories of her childhood on trail rides in California and as a camp counselor grooming horses in her teens. I said sure, I was game. So we headed to the local stables on Skye. And when we got there, we looked around, and the stable guide asked us if we had any experience on horses. My mom said, yes, we do have some experience on horses. And what she really should have said was not that much experience on horses. But she did know enough to say that if you told the guide that you didn't have much experience on horses, then they would stick you on the old nag. You know, the old horse that's been put out to pasture. Stables in the US are filled with these kinds of horses, broken down old ones who are too tired or too stubborn to go anywhere. Well, my mom and I looked around the stable, the horses at this stable, and we didn't see any such horses. What we saw was a spirited bunch of steeds with flickering manes, and they were whinnying and neighing and stomping their hooves in the mud. This was the first indication that horseback riding in Scotland might not be all that much like horseback riding in the United States. The second indication was that we didn't sign any waivers, or at least I don't recall doing that. Now, this probably reflected our guide's comfort in the fact that we were going to have a safe and enjoyable ride across the rocky moor in Scotland that would be wonderful and enjoyable by people of all ages and all experience levels. Or, and this probably should have occurred to me, it might have meant that the Scottish approach to adventure travel was more like caveat emptor, or in Scottish, buyer beware. Now, the third indication that things in Scotland might be a little different than they are in the US was the trail, or lack thereof. This was no single file line of horses making the same old loop day after day. This was an open expanse of countryside. So our group of 8 or 10 horseback riders saddled up and set off on the moor. The scenery was spectacular. We trotted off on the green grass and the purple heather under the gray cloud cover. It was rugged and rocky and vast and windswept, straight out of wuthering heights. It was breathtaking. About an hour into our trip, our guide slows us down and says, "Would any of you like to try a wee gallop?" Well, this sounded amazing to me, but obviously it would be imprudent to take a group of inexperienced city slickers on a gallop across unmarked terrain in a foreign country. So I looked around to see who was with me, and when I did, I saw that about half of the group had their arms up, including my mother. Now, this shouldn't have come as a total surprise to me. My mom was a bit of an adrenaline junkie. She loved adventure, and that's, in fact, how we wound up in Scotland. At 49 years old, after stints as a gym teacher, a real estate agent, and then a massage therapist, my mom decided to become a flight attendant for United Airlines. Now, we all thought she was kind of crazy to be starting off on a new career, especially one as grueling as that. But then we learned that being a flight attendant might have the world's most amazing perk. You and your family got to fly for free virtually anywhere in the world. Now, this was why my mom took this job. She wanted to keep up with us kids as we were growing older and studying abroad and traveling around the world and even working around the world. So, travels with Mom began. My dad, my brother, my sister, and me flew all over the world with Mom. We went to Europe and Asia, North and South America, and Australia. Now, we were in our 20s at this point, and we had hardly any money. But Mom was willing to keep up with us the whole time. She stayed in cruddy hostels with us and ate crappy roadside food. All so we could kind of save up our money and do the fun, exciting things. So in her 50s, my mom went caving in California. She went scuba diving and snorkeling in Australia, skydiving in New Zealand, and of course, horseback riding in Scotland. She even went floating down the River Nile on a boat in Egypt. But back in Scotland, I saw that my mom's hand was up, but I was at least relieved that at least some of us did not put our hands up. Surely, our leaders would not take us on an advanced ride if only half of us had our hands up. But before I could finish that thought, we were off, galloping at full speed across the country. I lowered my head and wrapped my hands around my horse's neck, hanging on for dear life. It was exhilarating, but it was terrifying, and I did not know how long I could hang on. Then, all of a sudden, we were mid-air. My horse and I were leaping over a creek. I did not know what was going on. The horse landed with a thud, and my body rammed into the horse's back. And I kind of fell halfway off and somehow managed to climb back into the saddle. The horse slowed down, and I caught my breath, and I took a look around to survey the scene. I was met with a sight of devastation. It was as if our cavalry had been decimated on the battlefront. I looked down, and 4 or 5 of our group members were on the ground, moaning and clutching their body parts. My mother was among the fallen. Now the guides seemed surprised. For some reason, they did not anticipate this perfectly logical outcome. One of them jumped off their horse and began to attempt to start to apply some kind of first aid, but she didn't know who to start with and where to begin. It seemed as if several people had broken bones. The other one galloped off into the distance and came back a while later in a beat-up old pickup truck. No stretchers, no splints, no crutches, nothing. So the wounded went into the back of the truck for what was sure to be a bumpy ride home. Meanwhile, my mother was able to make her way up, and she could move her arms and legs, and she said she was feeling okay. So she was triaged along with the rest of us into the group with only minor injuries or no injuries. So we waited a bit, and we got our ride back to the stables too. But my mom was feeling in pain, so we decided we better head to the hospital as well. When we get to this hospital, which is just a tiny little place on this Isle of Skye, the nurse looks up and says, "Aye, you're with the horseback riding group, are ya? We're full up with you folks tonight. You're gonna have a wait." So we sit down and we wait, and we wait. And finally, a bed opens up for my mom. So the doctor wants to do an x-ray of my mom's skull, but they don't have the necessary equipment at this little hospital. So they decide to send us to Inverness, which is where the nearest hospital is. That's several hours away. But of course, we don't have any way to get there. So they load us up onto the ambulance, which swings by our B&B and lets us pick up our things, which is so nice. Now, my mom at this point is jacked up on pain meds, and for some reason, she asked the EMTs what they wear under their kilts, and I'm like, oh my God, that's so embarrassing. Can you just not do that? But we managed to get there without offending our drivers too much. My mom is able to be seen at Inverness, and they take the skull x-ray, and the doctors walk in, and they say, good news, no skull fracture, you're free to go. So we set off in the morning, and my mom is feeling okay, but she's got a bottle of pain meds, and she thinks she's gonna be okay. So we happen to be near Loch Ness, which is also highly recommended in our guidebook. So we decided to check that out before making our way back home. When we get back to the United States, my mom is still in a lot of pain. So she goes to see her doctor, who tells her she has a cracked rib. Now, I love my mom and her adventurous spirit, but I sometimes thought she took it a little bit too far. When I was thinking about this story, it reminded me of The Runaway Bunny. I don't know if you know that book. It's a childhood story where the mother changes shape to kind of keep up with her little bunny. And the bunny changes to a flower, well then she changes to a gardener, the bunny changes to a sailboat, and she changes into a gust of wind. And it made me think of my mom and her adventurous spirit, and I kind of thought, well, maybe these travels are more than just a reflection of her adventurous spirit. Maybe they're also a reflection of her just desire to spend time with her kids as they grew up. And so that's what my mom did. She changed into a flight attendant, a horseback rider, even a hospital patient inadvertently. Also, she could spend time with me and my siblings. And for that, I will be forever grateful. Thank you.